Hello, my dear friends. When I originally became a rabbi in Congregation or Torah, I thought that a drasha is more effective if it's complicated and intricate. As time went on, I realized that the most powerful and effective drashas are simple and to the point, and that's the type of drasha that has the most influence on other people. So I have a simple but powerful idea to share with you today. The Chumash describes the relationship between Abraham and his nephew Lot. They traveled together. Lot traveled with Abraham and Sarah when they left Ur Kasdim and came to Eretz Canaan. But at one point, the relationship soured because there was the dispute between the shepherds of Abraham and the shepherds of Lot. Rashi says that they were arguing over the use of territory in Eretz Yisrael. The shepherds of Lot thought that they could graze their animals any place in Eretz Yisrael because God promised the land to Avram, and Avram shepherds felt that's going to be in the future, but right now it still belongs to others. So they got into an argument. There was a riv, which means a machlokas, between the Roe Miknei Avram and the Roe Miknei Lot, the shepherds of Avram's cattle and Lot's cattle. So Avraham approaches Lot and he says, Al not tehi meriva beini v'necha. There should not be a machlokas between you and me. And therefore, Avram suggests, let's separate. We have to have space between each other. We have to have distance between one another. And therefore, Lot eventually moved away to a different city, a different location. So I have a simple question to ask. The machlokus was between the Roe Miknei Avram and the Roe Miknei Lot, between the shepherds. Nothing to do with Avram and Lot. It was the shepherds that got into an argument about grazing land. And it was a halachic dispute whether they have a right to the land, they don't have the right to the land. But Avram and Lot weren't involved in that discussion. They were not part of that confrontation. So why does Avram say there should not be a meriva beini v'necha? There shouldn't be a fight between you and me. Who's talking about a fight between Avram and Lot? Avram and Lot got along well together. There was no fight. What does it mean, a fight between Avram and Lot? So I think the answer is as follows. The Shalach HaKodesh makes a beautiful comment. He says that the Chumash uses two words to describe conflict in this parsha, Riv and Meriva. Now they both mean the same thing. The word Meriva, in the root, in the center of the word, is the word Riv. So there's a mem and a hey on one side and the other. That's Meriva. But basically, Riv and Meriva both mean the same thing. They mean a dispute. So he asks, why does the Chumash begin saying there was a riv between the shepherds of Avram and Lot? And then it says, Avram said to Lot, there shouldn't be a meriva between us. Why the transition from riv to meriva? So the Shalach HaKodesh says that machlokas spreads. It starts small, and then it spreads, and it engulfs other issues as well. The difference between Riv and Meriva, Riv is Lashon Zocher, it's masculine. Meriva, which has a hey at the end, is Lashon Nekeva, it's feminine. So he says that a machlokas is feminine in the sense that it bears fruit, it has children, it has offsprings, it has the first generation, the second generation, it goes on. And that's because that's the nature of machlokas, that of strife and confrontation, that it spreads. And therefore, initially there was a riv between the shepherds of Avram and Lot. But eventually Avram says, it's going to, mark my words, he says to Lot, there's going to be a meriva between you and me, feminine. It's going to have offsprings. It's going to be multiply. And therefore Avram says to Lot, we have to separate. In what way does the machlokas spread? Oh, and the Shalach, I should add as well, the Shalach says that the word machlokas, which means an argument, the letters of machlokas reflect also how arguments spread, because the mem, the first letter, has a small opening on the left side of the letter. Ches is completely open on the bottom. So it goes from being small to big. That's the machlokas is progressing. And then the last letter of machlokas is the tuf, and the tuf has a foot that's moving outward to show that it's spreading, it's engulfing other areas. I would modify, or not modify, but I would add maybe to what the Shalah is saying, and I would say that a riv means an argument. A meriva means a state. There's a state of dispute. There's a state of battle. There's a state of confrontation. And the difference is that a riv is its focus. The focus is on the issue, but a meriva is an argument between the people. The people become part of the argument. The people become angry at each other. The people have animosity and hostility, and they attack each other because it moves from being a riv. We have a specific difference of opinion, but then it becomes a meriva. Meriva is like a whole. There's a word that's commonly used today, matzav. It means it's a situation. A meriva is a situation. It's a matzav. It's a state of conflict. It's like countries that are fighting. They're not just having disputes. They're at war with each other. That's a meriva. In what way does a machlokas spread? What does it mean that a machlokas spreads? So I think in a few ways. First, it means that it spreads in terms of the point of conflict. It may start out with one point, but then it engulfs other things. So a person might be angry at somebody else. Somebody insults me, so I'm annoyed, and I get into a fight about that. But then I bring up, hey, this is not the first time. 10 years ago, when you made a simcha, you didn't invite me, and I invited you to my simcha, so what's that? How come you didn't reciprocate? And then, not only that, but I remember 5 years ago, I came to shul Shabbos morning, and you were standing in the door, and I said good Shabbos to you, and you ignored me. You didn't even say good Shabbos. You didn't even respond to me. You think I forgot? That's meriva. It encompasses more. It starts out with one little issue of conflict, and then it spreads to other areas. But secondly, meriva spreads in terms of people. It starts with one person, but then it spreads to others. There's no such thing as a conflict that's contained, or not that there's no such thing, but typically the conflict spreads. It spreads within the people in the household get involved, and friends get involved, and people take sides, and that's how it spreads and becomes pervasive. It's like the COVID virus. It's always spreading, and it spreads like the plague, which it is. So that's how machlokas is. The machlokas is a plague, and it spreads and encompasses other people. So Avram says to Lot that it's true that the machlokas was between your shepherds and my shepherds, but mark my words, it's going to be mariva beini uveinecha. We will ultimately be pulled into the machlokas as well, because that's the nature of machlokas. It draws other people into the confrontation, and therefore Avram says it's not only the shepherds that are going to be fighting, it's you and I that will get into machlokas as well. And the powerful lesson here is that we need to realize and recognize our influence, both in a negative way and in a positive way. We set a tone that, if we set a tone for ourselves, it has powerful. Contagious. It spreads to other people. So, for example, in our household, if we, as the adults in the household, if we set a certain tone, if it's a friendly household, if it's warm, if it's inviting, there's sensitivity, so that it spreads to all the members of our household. But it's not only in a household; it's in a shul, it's in a congregation as well, and it's not, and it's also in a community. I have visited many shuls where you just feel that they're not that friendly. They don't say hello, and they don't make you feel welcome. And other shuls, they're so happy to see you. And Baruch Hashem, our shul, Congregation of Torah, and I think it's true of all the shuls in the neighborhood, they're all welcoming. And our community is unified. Everybody talks about the unity and the achdus of Highland Park. And how did that happen? It's because it spreads. You have a few people who are that way, so it self-promotes itself, and it spreads to other people in the community. But if you have people that are balei machlokas, who are always getting into arguments, or you have people that are angry, and everything is with barking and accusing and attacking. So that spreads as well, and therefore we have tremendous responsibility, because our behavior, both in our household and in our synagogue and in our community, and it's also true, by the way, in a place of business. I've often observed there's certain offices where everybody's friendly, and in other offices where everybody's is not friendly. Certain businesses where they're consumer oriented and they want to help you. Other businesses, they don't care what the consumer what his needs are. They're just ignored. I have often visited companies for the OU, and certain companies are friendly, warm, welcoming, cooperative, and other companies, whoever you deal with, is all the same. They're all difficult people. How does that happen? Because these things spread. The character and the nature of companies, businesses. Some stores are you feel one way, some the other. The character of a business, the character of people's offices, the character of communities, the character of shuls, the character of people's homes is something that spreads from person to person. And therefore, we have a tremendous responsibility. On the one hand, we have to remember that if we get angry, or we get engaged in an argument with people, or we're fighting, we're accusatory, that is going to have an impact on the whole community, because Riv becomes Meriva. That's the nature of the beast, that it spreads. And on the other hand, if in contrast to Riv and Meriva, if we will be considerate, we will be thoughtful, we will be nice to other people, we will control our tempers, then the relationship that we have, our personal relationships between ourselves and others, eventually will engulf others and draw others in as well, and will have a enormously positive impact. So a person should remember, we should all remember, that we're not in it just for ourselves. Every riv becomes a meriva, and every situation, every matzav spreads to others. Chas v'shalom, it shouldn't be negative, and the focus has to be positive. Do positive things. Make people feel welcome. Be friendly. Be thoughtful. When there's somebody has a need, go out of your way to help the person, and that is not only benefiting the particular person, but that is going to benefit the community and the congregation as well, because what we do influences many people as well.